Ryan Glover, and I wanted to do this video about JD Vance, Donald Trump. They were recently asked questions about what would they do to lower the cost of child care for Americans. Like, obviously, like, inflation is a big issue. We have the rising cost of food, gas, everything is costing more. So you think, like, Republicans would have an answer to be able to, like, alleviate, like, this concern for Americans is child care. Like, the costs are rising. It's a increased burden for families. But Donald Trump and JD Vance really don't have an answer. I think JD Vance said something about that he would tell people to rely more on their grandparents or their parents. That sounds great, but what about people who don't necessarily have family? He was saying, like, that they could cut the cost of, like, the requirements for people who work in childcare, where they wouldn't need, like, to go to college for 6 years or something of that sort. Which, like, that sounds great, but this is what happened, like, when you have people who are unqualified. And Trump's answer was even worse. You would think, like, Donald Trump, who rambles, I feel like he can never answer a direct question. He was basically saying child care wasn't, like, that expensive. He's going to make America great again, that rhetoric. But he doesn't have a specific policy issue. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, is going to bring back a $3,600 tax credit for working families, a $6,000 tax credit for newborns, which is, like, not a lot of money. I feel like, it can definitely help some Americans. And, like, it's a Pacific plan opposed to this unqualified Republican leadership who have proven, like, that they're incompetent. And I think, like, that's one of the issues when you have people who are not qualified for office, like JD Vance and Donald Trump. And I keep saying it over and over again, like, people need to look at how the end of Trump's presidency was. Do people want to go back to that, where it looked like, that we were on the brink of a civil war? COVID had happened. Like, it was just a horrible time in America. And I can't believe that people were still considering voting for him. But, like, I think, like, obviously that child care is an important issue. Being a parent, child care, like, you don't want to burden your relatives. I feel like JD Vance's answer is that, yeah, obviously, like, grandparents want to spend time with your children, but at the same token, like, I feel that what if you don't necessarily live, like, next to your grandparents? Like, for instance, like, I've lived in multiple different states where I wasn't really near any family. So in that particular situation, you can't really rely on your family to be able to do childcare. I feel like, there's a lot of other Americans, maybe they, when you have young children and your children are high energy, I have 3 kids, so, like, I wouldn't want to, like, just, like, leave my children with my parents all the time, because, like, obviously they're older. And, like, I feel like, they wouldn't necessarily be able to handle, like, the energy all the time and stuff, like, but I think, like, that there's an answer to this situation. Kamala Harris is doing a better job of, like, handling, like, some of the issues with the tax credits. And Republicans, like, are just giving rhetoric, and it's not something that they're even concerned about. And the fact that they're not in touch with, like, the needs of Americans, how can these people, like, speak for you? I see, like, a lot of times and stuff and everything that people are, supporting Trump, because maybe, like, and stuff, they like, his views about Israel, or, like, they like, that, you know, they feel like, he's anti-abortion, and, like, they're cracking down on, taking, like, rights away from women. And I think that, people support him, like, on those policy issues. But, like, at the end of the day, he seems to be very out of touch with, like, I think a very important issue to Americans, because people are going to continue to have children. Child care is very costly, and a lot of Americans can't afford it. And I think, like, that it should be, like, a greater, like, access to child care for children. I think, like, we need to have, like, programs like Head Start, like, where basically, like, it's affordable for people, like, to have access to childcare so they can be able to work. And I think, like, these programs are important, and that Republicans get rid of these programs historically. And that's the sad thing. A lot of times, like, Trump's base are the people who are most affected by his poor policies. They don't benefit from it. And, people could argue, like, that he creates a strong economy. But, like, the statistics don't show that. And I think, like, it's more so an emotion. I feel like, that the only thing that Trump is really good at is causing divisiveness and stoking fears in this country, like, by xenophobia, by targeting immigrants, people that are coming to this country illegally and making it seem like they're the problem. Well, like, I mean, maybe, like, we should embrace, like, this new group of people and, like, allow, like, them to be able to work easier in the country so that they can be able to work in, like, fields like childcare. I see, like, people coming from, like, other countries, and instead of, like, looking at it as a negative, I think, like, we start looking at, like, as a positive, and, like, making it easier for people to participate in society, not alienating groups of people. And, like, I know a lot of people will probably disagree with this, but, like, as far as, like, people, like, coming across the border, it seems like, that there's a way, like, that we could integrate people into this country faster and give them a path to citizenship. And, like, it just seems like, better than the alternative, instead of, like, demonizing and deporting people. And, like, obviously that's a cost. Who benefits from that? Like, law enforcement. I feel like, that we need to really start embracing, like, the reality that this border crisis isn't going to end, and, like, be more welcoming as a country. But, childcare obviously is important. Let me know in your thoughts about, like, childcare, and how you feel like, that this issue would be solved. And are you going to, like, is this an important issue in the election? I think, like, a lot of times that people feel that, it doesn't affect them because, like, they don't have children, or they're not necessarily planning on having children. So obviously for some people, this wouldn't be an issue that they would vote on. But, like, if you're a parent, obviously, like, and you have young children, this may be, like, an issue that's on your mind, or that you're concerned with. And what are some of the issues that you are concerned with in this election? Like, what would be something that you would ask, Vice President Harris, or you would ask Trump or Vance? And I think, like, that I'm really turned off by the Republicans. And it's not because of the fact that the Make America Great Again slogan, I feel that is xenophobic, because, like, America has never been great, particularly for minorities in this country, people who look like me. And, obviously, like, Trump, he is a fan of law enforcement, which I'm not. And I'm not a fan of law enforcement because I understand that the police have to do a job. But the thing that bothers me about it is the fact that it's the job that has been used to target people who look like me, as opposed to bringing actual justice. I feel like the police in this country, like, target minorities, as you've seen with Sonia Massey. And Kamala Harris obviously represents that, being a former prosecutor, which is, like, I'm not a huge fan of her, but I will say she seems very competent about, like, the issues. And I feel like, Donald Trump just, like, rambles, and he doesn't, like, really have, like, any answers to put America on the path to be great, besides stoking xenophobia and, like, divisiveness in this country. And, he couldn't even answer a basic question about childcare. And I think that's very troubling. So I would like you guys, like, to follow me on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter, Ryan Glover 18, follow me on Instagram, Ryan Glover 187, follow me on Twitter, Ryan Glover 1982. And let me know, guys, like, what are the important issues in the country for you? Do you feel like childcare is an important issue? Do you feel like the cost of childcare is too much? Like, what would you like to see change? Do you feel like Kamala Harris tax credit idea is a good idea? Do you feel like that would help you as a parent? I wonder, do you feel Trump's competent to be president? Let me know in the comments. And are you satisfied with his answer about childcare, him and Vance? Do you feel like, these people are competent? I feel like a lot of times, like, Kamala, like, they say she's not competent. I think, like, that's racist because she's a black woman. She slept her way to the top. But I think it's clear that Donald Trump is the incompetent one and JD Vance.